Hello. Today I will provide a brief lesson on mild to moderate intellectual, or otherwise known as learning disability. Before I get to what mild to moderate learning disabilities are, I want to provide a visual of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The Individuals with Disability Education Act was passed to protect students with learning disabilities in public schools and public education. There are six components that go into the IDEA. First is free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE. In this, students or schools are required to provide students with disabilities with a free education and additional support for academic success. For example, a school cannot turn away a student with a visual impairment and must provide support for him or her in the classroom. It also includes appropriate evaluation. In this component, trained professionals administer appropriate assessment to students with disability. This protects students from discrimination. For example, a student with a learning disability will not be subjected to an assessment for students with visual impairments. Other components include the Individual Education Plan. IEPs ensure that parents and school officials are meeting the academic and social needs of students with disabilities. The IEP team meets annually to review goals made and, and make changes to the plans. For example, a student with a learning disability may have specific goals to meet with a resource teacher 3 times per week. All this is discussed during the IEP plan meeting. The least restrictive environment um, is a student with a disability is provided with a learning environment that meets his or her academic needs. For example, a student with ADHD may be placed in a smaller group setting with less distractions. And the final two, parent participation. Parents hold the right to be part of any decision process for students with disabilities. Parents can call meetings and accept or deny any request for assessment or evaluation. For example, a parent with a student with ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, may refuse to have his or her student placed in an inclusive classroom. And finally, procedural safeguards. Parents and students have the right to call a meeting if any disagreement or concerns arise. They must be presented with their rights by the school. This comes in a form of a parent booklet. Parents are offered booklets at each IEP meeting. So those are the six components of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. So what is a mild to moderate learning disability? For sake of time, this is the definition we will use. It's a learning disability that often requires more scaffolding or direct instruction for students. However, it does not present any major developmental or physical delays. That being said, students with learning disabilities they often look like their non-disabled peers, they often act like them, but they lack the academic or social soundness. For example, a student in your classroom may look completely quote unquote normal, but may not be on the same reading level as their other peers. The prevalence of and characteristics of students with LD. LD um, encom encompasses the largest category of students with special education services. About 2.4 million students in public education are considered LD under IDEA. 42% of the 5.7 million with all kinds of disabilities who receive special educations are served in this category. The number of students identified with LD declined by 18% between 2002 and 2011. And I found this very interesting. The reason for the decline is that preschools, first of all, universal preschool, and second of all, um, better strategies for reaching those kids with learning disabilities in the lower grades, as opposed to identifying them in the higher grades. Two-thirds of students identified with LD are male, and Black and Hispanic students are overrepresented in many states, while white and Asian are underrepresented in the LD category. The identification process, many things go into identifying students with LD. Some things taken into account are standardized tests, how they perform on state tests, informal measures, that just means gathering student work from the classroom, parent and teacher observations, both at home and in school, and progress monitoring, so how the student is progressing in the academic classroom. Characteristics, like I said, um, they don't typically or students with learning disabilities don't typically look different from their non-disabled peers. But here are some common characteristics. Disorder of attention, so they lack the focus. Reading difficulties, poor motor skills, so they might not be able to write as fast as others, or they might not be able to copy what's on the board to paper as easily as other students. Written language difficulties, oral language difficulties, social skills deficits, psychological process deficits, quantitative disorders, and information processing problems. In an inclusion class, these are strategies that will work with students with learning disability, breaking it into smaller steps. So instead of having 5 steps to follow, they may only have 2 steps to follow. Administer probes, so that just means formative assessments throughout the learning. Supply regular and quality feedback, so instead of just giving them a grade, telling them how they can improve it next time. Use of diagrams or visuals to augment what is being taught. Well-designed independent practice. Model instructional procedures. Don't just expect them to do it, but show them how to do it. Provide prompts of strategies to use. So for example, coming up with a hand gesture, and that way the student knows that there's a particular strategy you want them to use in that assignments. Providing them, or excuse me, engage in process types questions. So asking them questions in which they answer verbally of how to make it better or how to explain a certain concept. Instead of them writing it, they do it verbally. These are the sources I used for this lesson. And that was a very short and brief lesson on what mild to moderate intellectual disabilities are. Thank you.